अध्यात्म योग ಶ್ರೀ ಸಚ್ಚಿದಾನಂದೇಂದ್ರ ಸರಸ್ವತಿ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿ, ಹೊಳೆ ನರಸೀಪುರ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ. This is the second book in the English series of that is published by Adhyatma Prakasha Karyalaya, Hole Narsipura, Karnataka. Vedantic texts. So here we have already seen two sessions in this book, Adhyatma Yoga. We have seen what is Adhyatma in several points, and we have seen what is Adhyatma Yoga. Now, today we will see what are the misconceptions regarding this. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah Harihi Om Shri Ganeshaya Namah. Dr. Krishnamurti Shastri, Dambe Punacha, Karnataka. So, misconceptions in Adhyatma regarding Adhyatma Yoga. The aspirant or sadhaka or jijnasu or mumukshu should not entertain the following misconceptions. At the end of this Adhyatma Yoga, one enters into Samadhi. Or Nirvikalpa Samadhi or trance. Second, one will get strange abnormal experiences or hearing wonderful sounds or seeing fascinating visions, etc. Third, getting or acquiring siddhis or miraculous powers. As these are very attractive and tempting powers or experiences, many people expect or anticipate such results, but all these are not at all concerned to this Adhyatma Yoga dealt with here. Because what is done and achieved afresh is non-eternal and is a time-bound thing, but here in Adhyatma Yoga one should cognize his true nature as the Self, who is beyond the concepts of time and space, and by this cognition he has to falsify the duality in its entirety, and thereby his ego or I sense, aham bhava. An aspirant should practice this Adhyatma Yoga till he gets established naturally in the awareness of the Self without any effort. This is called in Vedanta as Jnana-nishtha. An aspirant should practice this Adhyatma Yoga till he gets established naturally without any effort in the awareness of the Self. This is called in Vedanta as Jnana-nishtha, and to get this Jnana-nishtha, this Adhyatma Yoga is a direct means or sadhana. The aspirant of this Adhyatma Yoga should observe outwardly humility, etc., which are prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter 7 to 11 shlokas, and 18th chapter 51 to 54 shlokas. And he has to try always to discriminate between the ego and the Self, who is its witness, that is the Self. He has to always try to discriminate between the ego and the witness or the Self. This is not a process of constant meditation or feeling as I am the Self, which comes under the purview of Kartrutantra sadhana. But one should observe keenly the facts of life with a concentrated mind, followed by discrimination mentioned above as a Vastutantra sadhana, not Kartrutantra or Purushatantra sadhana. Mostly in these days, the teachers or gurus in the spiritual field highly recommend meditation, and the methods of meditation prescribed by them are useful to some extent in our daily life. But this Adhyatma Yoga is quite unlike those meditations. Hereafter, cognizing the non-dual nature of the Self, through the practice of this Adhyatma Yoga, there will be no question of the triad of the beneficiary, the benefit, and the source or the means of the benefit. Please refer to the quotation given above the Brihadaranyaka, that is Kartru, Bhoktru and Karma. There is no this triad actually. It is non-eternal. Please refer to the quotation given above from Brihadaranyaka 2:4-14, which but when to the knower of Brahman everything becomes the Self, When to the knower of Brahman everything becomes the self, then what should one see and through what? After listening to this Adhyatma Yoga, some people take it as a subject matter which has to be grasped by the intellect. These people think that they have correctly understood, but they keep on asking what next. These types of questions indicate that they have not yet acquired the necessary qualifications to intuit their own true nature as the self. Hence, they think that these are all intellectual exercises or noetics, because these people have understood that after knowing all these theories we have to practice some exercises to achieve concrete or tangible results in time. They naturally distinguish between the theory and the practice as is evident in our daily life. But at the beginning itself we have reiterated that that which is done and achieved afresh is non eternal and is invariably time bound. This is forgotten by these people, and this in itself becomes a disqualification for them. That which is restricted by time, space, and that which is not self can be achieved by practice after having known it theoretically. But in the case of the self, who is the very core of one's being and whose nature is immediate and direct, there is no possibility whatsoever of distinctions like theory and practice. One's own self is the practical of the practical. Here, the only effort needed is to seize one's natural tendency of identifying himself with not selves, non selves, from the ego to the body. In this regard, Shankara states in the Gita Bhashya 18th chapter 15th shloka, therefore, we have only to eliminate what is falsely ascribed to Brahman by avidya. We have to make no more effort to acquire a knowledge of Brahman as he is quite self evident. This is the Shankara Bhashya. So, next, we have seen the misconceptions. Next, meaning of certain important words according to Shankara's Bhashyas. So, terminologies and their proper meanings according to Shankara. This Adhyatma Yoga is described here according to Shankara's Prasthanatraya Bhashyas. In this connection, there are many words used in the Bhashyas like yoga, samadhi, etc. The meaning of these types of words is different in the Bhashyas from what meaning has been commonly given to them by others. For this purpose, we would like to show here below some actual meanings given to these words by Shankara in his Bhashyas, Prasthanatraya Bhashyas. First one, in the Gita 2:44, that is second chapter, 44th shloka, the word samadhi is interpreted by Shankara as samadhi means buddhi or antahkarana, in which are gathered together all objects of enjoyment for the Purusha, the individual soul. Here Shankara says that the conviction of a resolute nature of the intellect is called as samadhi. Conviction of a resolute nature of the intellect is called as samadhi, meaning one can determine whether to go towards the worldly enjoyment or towards emancipation, and for both the resolute nature of the intellect is the main cause. Hence samadhi means buddhi. Sam adhiyate iti. Samyak adhiyate iti samadhi. That is pure concentration in the buddhi. It is a work of buddhi or intellect. Second one, in the Gita, second chapter, 53rd shloka, the word samadhi means the self. The mind or the intellect gets completely still when one cognizes the true nature of the self by discrimination. Hence, the self is called as samadhi. Dhi means the self. Except cognizing the real nature of the self, there is no equipoise of the mind. So, in the 54th stanza of this chapter, the word samadhista means one who is already established naturally in his true nature as the self. Next, third point, in the Mandukya Karika 3:37, the word samadhi is interpreted by Shankara in two ways. First, from the standpoint of the intellect, the firm conviction about the true nature of the self is obtained by a concentrated or one pointed mind, and so this awareness of the self is called as samadhi. From the standpoint of the self, in the self alone, the mind gets the equipoise and hence the self is called as samadhi. The word yoga is interpreted by Shankara in the following manner. First, in the Gita 2:53, yoga means the awareness of the true nature of the self as a result of discrimination. Second, in the Gita 2:39, the word yoga is used in the sense of means to reach jnana, that is Sankhya, meaning the practice of karma yoga is the means to attain jnana, that is yoga, path, sadhana, path. Third, in the introduction to the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the meaning of the word yoga is given as follows: the natural establishment in the true nature of the self and the consequent result of complete renunciation, and that which will be attained by the means of karma yoga, that kind of yoga was taught in the previous two chapters. Here, yoga means natural establishment in the true nature of the self. Next, fourth point, practicing the direct means to get the cognition of the true nature of the self viz. Shravana, listening, Manana, contemplation, and Nididhyasana, Adhyatma Yoga. This kind of practice is known as Sankhya or Sankhya Yoga, and before this, practicing Karma Yoga is called as the path of yoga. In the fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, these two paths are described. Next, fifth point, as we have stated before, the various names of Adhyatma Yoga are given as Dhyana Yoga in the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Mano Nigraha Yoga of Mandukya Karika, and all these are concerned to Nididhyasana. Sixth point, in Bhagavad Gita 9:5, the word yoga is described as a divine mystery of the Lord or the self and is called as yoga, meaning the self who is the substratum of the whole phenomena of the dualistic world, simultaneously appearing as if he has taken the form of the world and at the same time being devoid of all the dualistic phenomena. This mystery is described here as yoga. Mama yogam aishwaryam. Mama, like that. It is a vibhuti or mahima of the God. Mahatmya or the speciality of the God, super speciality. In all these places mentioned above, Shankara has described the word yoga according to the true traditions of Vedanta, but he has not taken into consideration the so called samadhis, yogas, etc., which are described in Raja Yoga, Patanjali Yoga, Hatha Yoga, etc. Hence, there is no mention whatsoever of the chakras, nadis, Kamalas, Kundalini, miracles, etc., in the context of self knowledge. In some places where there are some peculiar types of upasanas mentioned in the Upanishads like Omkara, Aham Graha, etc., sometimes the nadis like Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna are mentioned, and Shankara has also accepted these terminologies in these chapters on Upasana according to Vedic utterances. But in the chapters devoted exclusively to self knowledge or intuition of the reality, there is no mention whatsoever of these words like chakras, centers, nadis, subtle nerves, etc. Before concluding the Adhyatma Yoga, we have to discuss about the impediments and the method of overcoming them according to Gaudapada's Karikas and the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Gaudapada mentions three obstacles as follows. One, Vikshepa. Second, Laya. Third is Sakashaya or Kashaya. Fourth is Rasaswada. Vikshepa means when a sadhaka starts practicing the process of Adhyatma Yoga, sometimes the mind wanders about thinking about worldly matters with a hankering for the enjoyment of the pleasure from outer objects. This tendency of agitation in the mind is called as Vikshepa. An aspirant should practice to overcome this defect by Vairagya, meaning non-attachment or renunciation. This non-attachment is of two kinds. First, one should observe incessantly that everything is full of misery and is non eternal. By observing these facts while enjoying worldly things, one should desist from hankering. This is half of the renunciation. The Buddhists and protagonists of other schools have taught this kind of renunciation only. But in Vedanta, the complete renunciation is prescribed for the aspirants. The nature of that renunciation is as follows. The aspirant should remember that the whole phenomena of duality is only a false appearance. The reality of this universe is the self, but one misconceives that very self as the world. The self is non dual, unborn, and absolute even at the time of appearing as the universe. So the reality is always unborn. From the standpoint of this reality, even now also there is no world as such. This is called here as remembering the unborn truth. When the sadhaka observes this on the firm ground of a comprehensive vision of life, then only he can get complete renunciation or vairagya. That is about vikshepa. Next, laya. At the time of inquiry, according to the process of Adhyatma Yoga, sometimes the intellect becomes dull and merges into deep sleep. This obstacle is caused by inertia, tamas. To overcome this, one should make his mind alert and he should try to engage himself in the process of discrimination inwardly, viveka, sadasad viveka, and outwardly. He should observe certain disciplines and regulations in life regarding diet, work, rest, sleep, etc. Please refer to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, shloka 17. By observing these regulations outwardly, one can conquer this tamas. That is about laya. Next, sakashaya or kashaya. Sometimes the mind comes to a standstill. Neither it follows the method of discrimination nor it goes to sleep. This condition of mind is called as seed form of the vikshepa. Here, the mind is ready to go out even when the attention is given up or let up for a moment. To conquer this defect, one should make repeated efforts to put it back on the track of discrimination, sadasad viveka. Fourth one, rasaswada. When the mind is absorbed in the process of discrimination, it gets a kind of pleasure or bliss, which is the sequel of the concentration on the subject matter. This pleasure or bliss is a hindrance for taking a stand in the true nature of the self. This is called rasaswada. Here, rasa means pleasure and aswada means enjoying it. To overcome his hindrance, one should rely on an acute process of discrimination, which is as follows. This pleasure is a reflection of the self in the mind due to concentration. As I am the self, I am the witness of this concept of pleasure. As I am the non dual self, there is no triple concept like the enjoyment, the enjoyer, and the enjoyed. I am of the nature of bliss, which is evident in deep sleep. This pleasure is a concept which appears and disappears. So, it is a false appearance in its true essence. By thinking in this way, one can overcome this hindrance. Refer to Gaudapada Karikas of Mandukya 3, 40, 46. All these matters have been summarized in the Bhagavad Gita, classifying these remedies into two groups. One is a constant practice, abhyasa, and the second is renunciation, vairagya. Constant practice is one should observe outwardly humility, purification of the mind, etc., which have been mentioned above. And inwardly, one has to practice the process of discrimination with a concentrated mind, which has been described above in detail. Vairagya is to be practiced as given in Gaudapada Karikas, which have been explained already. By observing these two, one can conquer all the hindrances or Adhyatma Yoga, for Adhyatma Yoga. So, by practice and Vairagya or renunciation. So, now the appendix portion here. There are three direct means, sakshat sadhanas, to self knowledge, and they are called as shravana, listening, manana, reflection, and nididhyasana, contemplation, according to Shankara Bhashya. Refer to Taittiriya Bhashya 1.11.4. Among these, nididhyasana has been dealt with in detail in Adhyatma Yoga. Here, for the benefit of the aspirants, I wish to discuss about the other two kinds of sadhanas, is shravana and manana. Shravana or listening. The aspirant or student should listen to the teachings of a competent guru or preceptor in accordance with the Upanishadic utterances. During the Shravana by the pupil, he is expected to refer to his own intuitive experiences so as to understand the teachings of the Guru properly. In this regard, the Guru or the preceptor has to be perforce one who is himself firmly established in his true nature as the self. Otherwise, the teacher will not be able to drive home the subtle implications of his teachings. Sri Shankara refers to this in his Kathopanishad Bhashya 1, 2, 8, and 9. Particularly in the 8th mantra, he has dealt in an elaborate manner with the results as well as the nature of the teaching. Sri Shankara has mentioned 4 points in this regard. 1. During the time of listening, the student cognizes his true nature as the self, which is ever free from mundane life or material life. Second, he will have no doubts of any kind about non-dual nature of the self. Third, there will be no residue of anything to be known. Fourth, there will be no question of not knowing or not cognizing the nature of the self. So, the Acharya or the teacher must be a competent one, and the pupil also must be one who is pure in heart and an introvert. An example: the common run of people believe that they are all born in this world at a particular time and place, and just like them, all the creatures also are born in this world. Every human being believes that I am also a creature born and brought up in this world and have enjoyed pleasure and pain, and eventually I am going to die one day. Before my birth, this world was there, and after my death, also, this world will continue to exist eternally. But according to the teachings of Vedanta, first the aspirant has to cognize his own being, which is beyond his I sense or ego, aham bhava. This process is elaborately dealt along with excerpts from Sri Shankara's Bhashya in the Adhyatma Yoga, page number 8. Naturally, the student has to take a stand in the true nature of being or the self and cognize that the whole waking state appears in his being, and in that state his ego and the corresponding world with the concepts of infinite time, space, and causation appear. During the time of Shravana or listening, the student invariably takes a stand in his true nature as the self, or he ceases his identification with his ego. Here, the aspirant should notice carefully that taking a stand in his self and ceasing his identification with his ego mean the same thing, and they are not two separate functions. From this standpoint of the self, or taking a stand on his being, it will be evident that his former beliefs are all misconceptions. Sri Shankara, in his Mandukya Bhashya, mentions the result of this kind of cognition in the following manner. The intention is to show that the entire phenomenal universe and the world of gods, together with this gross cosmic self, contribute to the constitution of the four parts. If the presentation is made in this way, non duality stands established on the removal of the entire phenomenal world, and self existing in all beings is realized as one, and all beings are seen as existing in the self. In this connection, some points are to be remembered. 1. The concept of infinite time and space is included in the waking state. So, the state itself is not in time or in space because it is included in the waking state only. So, it itself has no existence, time and space. Second one, this self, who is the substratum of this whole waking phenomenon, is beyond time and space. Hence, it is incorrect to say that the self is one and the state is the second. Third one, the self is of pervasive nature and he has pervaded the whole phenomena of the waking state. So, it is evident that the nature of the self is non dual and absolute, but owing to the ignorance of this true nature of the self, the same self appears as the waking world. Fourth point, thus the result mentioned by Sri Shankara in his above said excerpt is achieved at the very moment of student's shravana or listening to the teacher's exposition, and he, the student, can easily see the whole universe in the self and the self in the whole universe. Here, the aspirant cognizes his true nature to be ever free from all mundane miseries. This is an example of Vedantic teaching. Sri Sri Sachidanandendra Saraswati Swamiji has declared for the first time that the concepts of time, space, and causation are within the state and The true nature of the self is without any shadow of doubt beyond these concepts of time, space, and causation. Before the advent of Sri Swamiji on the Vedantic firmament, all the so called Advaita Vedantins believed that in one day the three states of the waking, the dream, and the deep sleep take place, and the self continues his existence in all these three states as well as in infinite time. You can see in Panchadashi, first Prakarana, 3 to 7 shlokas. To get the experience of non dual nature of the self, one should get into a trance, samadhi, by means of the Patanjali Yoga after Shravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana. By mere discrimination, one cannot get the experience of the true nature of the self. See Panchadashi, first Prakarana, 53 to 61 shlokas. But our Swamiji revealed the truth that the self cannot be experienced by the student, but he has to intuit that the self is not and can never be an objectifiable thing by means of viveka or discrimination only. The word discrimination is misunderstood in these days to be an intellectual exercise. It is totally forgotten here that viveka or discrimination means that one should separate his true nature as the self from his ego or I sense, ahambhava. So it is evident from this that the self is not to be attained in any particular state or condition. This fact has been stressed by Sri Shankara in his Sutra Bhashya as follows: for the identity of the self and Brahman stated in that thou art, that is tat tvam asi, is not contingent on any particular state. So the competent student can attain the final goal of life by shravana or listening alone. This is also stated by Sri Shankara in the Sutra Bhashya as follows: those of sharp intellect, on the other hand, who have no obstruction like ignorance, doubt, and confusion with regard to the object to be known, can realize the meaning of that thou art, even from the first utterance, so that a repetition in their case is certainly useless. When one cognizes his true nature as the self, he gets a firm conviction about his own nature, and this firm conviction is called as Atma Pratyaya. To engender this Atma Pratyaya in one's own mind, Shravana or listening is the only means, and its result is the dawn of Atma Pratyaya. This is explained by Sri Shankara in the following passages of his Bhashyas: Gita, Mandukya Mantra, and Mundaka, Mandukya Karika. In all these places, the result of Shravana is described as producing the Atma Pratyaya in the student's mind. Through this Atma Pratyaya, only one can take his stand in his true nature as the self and in no other way. However, it should be remembered that here by the Atma Pratyaya, the self is not objectified, but the dawn of Atma Pratyaya itself is revealed in the light of the self. Hence, to know the self is to be the self, and to be the self is to cease the identification with the non selves. Thus, the student falsifies the appearance of the dualistic world and remains in his true nature as the non dual Brahman. Thereafter, there is no question of his having any aspiration for anything in time and in space, and further, there cannot be any possibility of contradiction of this right vision whatsoever. This fact is stressed by Sri Shankara in his Brihadaranyaka Bhashya towards the end of 236. These are the essential features of Shravana. I think the last portion of this book, Adhyatma Yoga, we will see in the next session. Thank you. Hare Rama.